I've got a confession to make. I'm not really what you would call a gamey gamer. I don't usually get excited over the new mechanics in a video game. I'm not particularly interested in complexity. If anything, I prefer simplicity. And I usually get bored by any video game that goes over the 40-hour mark. What I really appreciate in a video game is when it tells a story in a way that a book or movie can't. Because of this, I often end up watching games instead of playing them. But sometimes when I watch a Let's Player go through a game, I'll stop the first episode within 5 minutes because I can tell that I'm going to want to experience the game personally, going in blind. The subject of today's video happens to be one of those games. A point-and-click horror adventure by Kill Monday Games. Allow me to show you what I think is so magical about Fran. Warning, this video is a part of the Nothing Sacred video game review series. If you are easily upset by offensive humor, I suggest you leave now. This show is not made for children. In Fran Bow, you play as Fran Bow. She's part of a happy family, 2 loving parents, a kind aunt, and a sweet little cat, Mr. Midnight. Happy, that is, until Fran discovers her parents chopped up into bloody pieces in their bedroom. She runs away with her cat until she collapses from exhaustion, being picked up by some nondescript individual and put in Captain Oswald Asylum against her will. The game opens with Fran in a session with some kind of doctor. She wants to go back to her room, but first she has to take a new medication, Duotine. She does, and then this happens. It was about this point in the game that I realized that I needed to experience it for myself. And I want to take this moment to say to all of you that if you haven't experienced it for yourselves, please, if you have any interest at all in the game, do yourself the favor and go experience it before continuing this video. Because this game truly is best experienced blind, and I will be going down spoiler territory. Be warned though, it's not for the faint of heart. The imagery in this story can be quite gruesome, and anybody with a sensitivity or a history of trauma may want to pass this one up. This is your last chance. Let's go. After hallucinating, Fran faints and has a vision. First, a figure that appeared outside her window before her parents being murdered threatens her that if she ever tries to leave the asylum, it'll put her right back. Then Mr. Midnight appears, telling her the medicine she took is the key to getting out of here, and that he'll be waiting for her outside. Chapter 1 is where we really get to start playing the game. As I said in the intro, it's a point-and-click adventure. Wherever you click on the screen is where Fran moves to, and whatever you click on, she'll interact with in some way. You can store items you find in the purse Fran's mother left her. Some items can be used to get further in the game, and some have to be combined with others to be used effectively. If you've ever played Freddy Fish, Pajama Sam, Monkey Island, or the Sierra Nevada point-and-click adventures, you'll feel right at home here. The name of the game is to get out, and not just because you were told to. The asylum is bad vibes all around. The other children are clearly not well, and the adults are apathetic at best. Sometimes it's hinted at things are even worse than that. So we gotta get out of here. Fran Bow had a vision of what to do, but the question is, was that a real, spiritual vision, or was it pure hallucination by the effects of the drug? Only time and experience will tell, but for now, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is we keep on moving. After a little exploring and manipulation, we managed to get the Duotine, and here lies the main mechanic. When Fran takes the Duotine, she hallucinates, or perhaps she sees another side of reality. When on the drug, she's able to interact with reality in ways she wasn't off of it. Be it genuine change or her personal psychological interpretation of her own experience of her own actions, Fran is able to do things she couldn't before. At any time, Fran can come off the drug to see reality as normal. Story-wise, this doesn't necessarily make sense, but it's the perfect mechanic for the game. The duality of humanity receives physical manifestation, and that manifestation can be interacted with. This is quite curious. First, there are blood writings on the wall, perhaps messages left for Fran. Then there are also creatures and items present that weren't before. Some of the children seem to be haunted in a sense. Some people change their appearance, and some people simply disappear entirely. The mechanic of Duotine is exactly what I mean about Fran Bow getting across a story in a way another media format couldn't. Fran is a clever girl, and we become intimately acquainted with that by being clever ourselves. Instead of a story unfolding as it will before our eyes, we must question the nature of Fran's predicament through our own personal exploration of it. For example, there's a key we need to get, but a guard is in front of it. So first we need to figure out how we can ever reach the key in the first place, and how to get past the guard in the second place. Earlier we found a hook and a cane that belongs to a little boy. That could work for reaching the key, but the boy is pretending to be a king and his cane is his sword. He's not about to give that up for free. He demands a castle and a horse in exchange. So what do? Obviously we can't give him a real castle and horse, but his sword is pretend. Maybe he'll settle for a pretend castle and horse? This is where we have to connect the dots ourselves. There's a boy with papers and a girl with crayons to spare, but neither wants to share. The boy believes his papers should show him what's on the TV for some reason. All we have to do is change it to channel 8, and he seems to think that does the trick for the current piece stuck to the TV. He then allows us to take a paper from the floor. The girl has multiple crayons but won't let us take even one. She first explains that she draws the creatures she can't see but are there in the asylum, the ones Fran can see when on the Duotine drug. She says that that the nurses tie her down and she isn't able to draw when she wants to, and when she can't draw, she hurts herself. She cuts herself and bleeds out of her wrists. She then says that if we can cure her, we can have the green crayon. We find a band-aid and put it on her wrist and get the green crayon. We then draw a castle and horse on the paper and give it to the boy, pretending to be the king to get his cane. And that's just half the battle. How do we get past the guard? I won't go in detail, but through a string of events, you can either put a sleeping pill in a cinnamon bun and feed it to him, or throw a scalding hot coffee on him so he leaves to clean up. Either way, that is how we get the key to escape. And this introduces us to the themes throughout the game, as at this point, either the spiritual realm could equally be believed to be real or fake. For example, that girl had an awareness of the creatures Fran could see, right? That's evidence of their existence. Yet, she has been drawing these creatures on the wall, and Fran lives in the same environment she does. It's equally possible that Fran manifested these creatures in her hallucinations. We can surmise that perhaps these children aren't always the best judges to go off of. After all, the girls seem to imply that the nurses tied her down to prevent her from drawing, and that's why she hurt herself. But it seems just as plausible they tied her down because she hurt herself. Another girl tells Fran that the doctor took her brain out and ate her thoughts, and that the same will happen to Fran. She knows because she saw Fran dead in the doctor's office. This could easily turn out to be the girl's interpretation of what therapy in the field of psychology do, and she probably saw Fran passed out during her duotine mishap. Which raises a disturbing question, because if it's true that Fran has been hallucinating these fantasies, then how did her parents die? Is it possible that Fran repressed the memory of what really happened and replaced it with a fantasy? And if so, who is it that killed her parents? As we escape from the asylum, another mystery presents itself. Fran finds a note about a patient being a target, with a triggered gland being successfully expanded through the use of a drug called ectoplasmin, or however you pronounce it. This drug disguised as duotine. Could Fran be the target? It makes me wonder if the trigger gland is the pineal gland, also known as the third eye in many spiritual practices. Ectoplasmin also has a striking resemblance to the word ectoplasma, which you might recognize from Ghostbusters, but more traditionally can be known as the substance emitted from the skin of mediums communicating with the dead. There's a good visual representation of that in Howl's Moving Castle. Either way, Fran makes her escape. As she unlocks the door from the basement, she has a vision. First, the mysterious figure threatens to mark her cat's life if she disobeys him, and then her cat reveals how to escape outside through a hedge grass maze. Making her way past some unfortunate souls, Fran gets outside to the maze. This part of the game is like a mini game. We have to follow the fake mechanical cat as best we can to reach the end, avoiding the dark spirits on the way. As a quick aside, does anybody else feel like those spirits resemble the ghosts or demons that live just outside the bathhouse and spirited away? I wonder if this game took inspiration from that. Fran escaping concludes Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Part 1 begins with Fran on the hunt to find her cat. She uses the duotine to ask all types of creatures for help. First is a set of heads with long hair stuck in a tree. She has to help them comb out the hair so they'll give her the key, but a rat stole their comb. Then she also comes across a giant talking ant and his pet beetle pig. Interestingly, she sees these while off the effects of the drug. The ant claims to have fed a black cat to his pet. I'm not even gonna lie. When I got to this part of the game, I damn near started crying. I was totally invested in the outcome of the story, and talking to the children at the asylum had already emotionally drained me. And y'all know me. I love my little gatos. Without seeming to feel any remorse for it, the ant tells Fran that although the beetle pig is his only friend left in the world, she should kill the pig to see if her cat is in there, and that way the ant will also get to eat some meat. Without any hesitation, Fran agrees. Naturally, the beetle pig avoids being killed, so Fran has to go on a hunt to retrieve berries from pinecone people to distract the beetle while she cuts it open. Inside is not Mr. Midnight, but the rat that stole the comb from the long-haired heads. He tells us the cat we're looking for was taken by something and is in great danger. He shows us where they disappeared. We construct a door out of materials we found nearby, get the comb from the rat, free the heads, unlock the door, and enter through, bringing us to Chapter 2, Part 2. We find ourselves in a house with very creepy decor. A bedroom full of dolls with their hair pulled out, an attic with a still bloody fox head hanging on the wall, and worst of all, Mr. Midnight! Oh, hooray! Mr. Midnight reveals he was captured by somebody while searching for us, and also that it wasn't really him Fran spoke to in her visions. He had visions of us too, and felt the presence of something else. Something not human. What this means for us is that something else was encouraging Fran to take the drug. At any rate, we've got to free our cat. We go downstairs to discover conjoined twins who seem to know who we are and where we've been, calling us the girl from the other world. These girls actually make a valid observation of Fran. Although she just found her beloved cat in a cage, she seems to be rather calm about it. They say it in jest, saying, shouldn't we be afraid of you? But this is something I've noticed myself with Fran. The more you talk to other characters with Fran, the more she seems to be a little too comfortable with the grotesque sometimes. We saw this with the beetle pig, but also at times in the asylum. The twins demand Fran do what they want, or they'll force Fran to kill Mr. Midnight with their own hands. She gives in and goes about finding ingredients for a magic potion that will potentially separate the twins. It seems they were once two separate bodies, but something forced them into one body together. As we look for ingredients, a toad in the backyard informs us not to trust the girls, and that if we're not careful, the ritual we're getting ready to perform could kill us. Now, something really interesting about this section is that we can guess we physically entered the type of world that Fran was able to see using the ectoplamaton, and that while taking the drug in this world, she's able to see and interact with the world she came from. While off the drug, she is in the conjoined twins' home, but when on ectoplamaton, she is in the well she attached the door to. While in the well, Fran finds a piece of paper with an alternate ritual that will either destroy an impure soul or free one that is trapped. Sure enough, Fran tricks the girls into letting her perform the ritual on them, and, well, the results speak for themselves. Alas, the key dropped from their dead body was not for Mr. Midnight's cage, but for a box with a puzzle. Inside we discover a note letting us know it was someone named Itward who joined them, which they hate because they hate each other and vow to kill him and it seems their own mother. From the sound of it, the ritual they wanted us to perform would not only separate them, but kill the weakest of the two. Now at this point it may seem obvious that what's happening truly is some type of magical thing, but I'm not so sure. Firstly, the photo of the twins looks like they're in the asylum, and there's a jar of duotine or ectoplamaton next to it. Secondly, do you remember the kid who wanted to put paper on the asylum TV? A lot of what happens outside the facility reminds me of what happened on that TV. One channel spoke of human testing being approved. I could see how Fran Bow could spin that into a story about the ectoplamaton being used on people. Then there was a channel showing an ant looking up at a pine cone on a tree branch. The berries Fran got were from a pinecone family that lived in the house of the ant we spoke to earlier. It's hard to say for sure, but I feel like maybe Fran is in a state of psychosis right now that helps her to survive her circumstances. She's convinced herself she's escaped the facility and found her cat. Maybe she has, maybe she hasn't. I'm not so sure. Fran uses the key she finds in the box to free Mr. Midnight, and the toad helps them both escape from the house across the surrounding water through a Frogger minigame. While crossing a bridge of sorts, the mysterious, murderous figure cuts Fran and her own kitty down. Fran falls all the way down from a cliff and wakes up as a tree in a strange land. We now play as Mr. Midnight. While a walking turnip harasses Fran, we find her purse and show them a picture of her family. They take us back to a castle, and so begins Chapter 3. In the castle, we're introduced to Zyar, king of the land of Itursta. He uses magic to see who we are and all we've been through, and he vows to help us. Fran is taken up to a cliff where Dr. Palantris greets her, who, let's be real here, is Falcor from the Neverending Story. I mean, come on, just look at this guy. Intentional or not, Palantris is pretty much just Falcor. Palantris takes us to a pink stream in the sky where he will supposedly give us the ability to walk around. Fran asks why she became a tree, and Palantris says is due to her own wishes. Sometimes we wish something so hard it comes true. Her human body completely broke down when she made that fall, so she became this tree to maintain her identity, her memories, and herself. I found this bit to be fascinating because I feel it draws from Eastern spirituality. Buddhism and Hindu dharmas make claims of reincarnation where your deep, driving desire at the time of death is what guides you in the immediacy of your next life. Fran had a strong desire to remain who she is, and so as she died, her spirit remained the same as she entered a new body in a new world. However, in doing so, she evidently opened a door between her world and Itursta, allowing others to get through as well, and Palantris says there is one who would like to take advantage of that for dark reasons, the Terrible Black. Take a wild guess who that could be. The operation is successful. Fran gains the ability to walk, and the king sends her to a wizard who will help her reach a door that will take her back to the world she came from. Entirely unsurprisingly, we have to go on a scavenger hunt, and this is where the mechanics of the game really blossom. I won't go in detail, but the basic mechanics of Itursta is time itself. Time and space are treated as one and the same. You travel through time as you would go from one place to another. So you alternate between the 4 seasons, certain events taking place during specific seasons, yet also what you do in one season affects what happens in the others. It reminds me of Click Clock Wood and Banjo-Kazooie, but in a less linear fashion. Winter is not the end, and spring is not the beginning here. Much like the snake eating its own tail, it's a perfect, never-ending circle. So in a way, the drug we were taking before served as a tutorial to get us ready for this area, where ectoplamatin had us interacting with 2 simultaneous realities to solve puzzles, Itersta doubles the complexity with 4 simultaneous realities. Although actually for the story's sake this is 4 seasons of one reality, not actually 4 separate realities. After completing our little scavenger hunt, the wizard puts together a ritual, turning us into a human once again. On the way back to the king, Fran has a vision of another version of herself holding a plush doll version of Mr. Midnight, wearing a crown resembling the head of the Great Black. She says that she kills traitors and stabs the plush, saying she does it to be happy. Fran cries and pleads that it wasn't her who did it, which earlier in this game was the very first blood message seen on the wall above her head when she took ectoplamatin. It was not me. And this is what made my opinion fall in the direction of Fran is a traumatized girl creating a fictional world inside of her head because she can't deal with reality. Because why else would Fran say that if she wasn't accused of it? I suspect that Fran was either in an abusive home and had to defend herself in some way, or she was already diagnosably psychotic and snapped one day, killing both of her parents. Unable to deal with this, she turns the part of herself that is capable of murder into an evil monster that she has to run away from. That's why everybody in Itersta calls her presence dangerous, her opening the door. Because what she's really doing is beginning to emotionally process the past events of her life, using fiction to slowly realize the non-fiction of memories that she repressed to survive. The other realities are her subconscious. Interacting with them represented becoming aware of them, and entering into them represents allowing what's at the subconscious level to rise to the conscious level. I suspect that means that when Palontras said, "I can't see this happening again, I just can't," it was referring to the possibility of Fran having another psychotic break. The good part of her is trying to prevent the part of her that's capable of terrible things from taking over her actions. Or perhaps she wasn't the one who killed her parents. Maybe she really did see somebody else do it, and because she can't remember it, she wonders if she did it herself. Maybe she overheard her aunt or other people at the facility accusing her of it behind her back. Back at the castle, the king gives us a box from Palontras, and the wizard opens the door for us. Fran enters and goes through another minigame, taking her back to her reality, and so begins Chapter 4. Fran and Mr. Midnight travel through the woods to find a bottle of pills on a string. Fran attempts to grab them, only to be strung up in a net. She uses a knife to cut herself down, and out pops Itward from the bushes, finally addressing them as himself. Itward claims they've been playing a game together. He says he used to come tell Fran stories at night after she imagined him. He exists because she exists, though by coming to reality from her imagination, he is not imaginary. He is a part of her reality, and that is how she was able to imagine him. Well, now, if that isn't some old school British children's story, Willy Wonka, Mary Poppins, Peter Pan logic, then I just don't even know what is. Itward says he can help Fran get home by taking flight at 2:35, when time slows down and it's possible to travel through the ultra reality. Itersta was the second reality, and Fran's world is the third reality. Itward has a large flying machine, but of course, there's some things that need doing before it can really start to fly. It's scavenger hunt time. We collect what we need and take off. Then while in the air, Itward has us complete some tasks while getting the automatic driver up and running. Once done, he meets back up with us and tells Fran that there's a bunny he's afraid of. We walk over to show him there's nothing scary about a toy rabbit, and he kidnaps Mr. Midnight, locking us in the room. At this point, I'm about as ready to murder as Fran was with the beetle pig. We solve our way out of the room and discover Itward was just setting up a surprise birthday party for us. Which is cool, but also totally not cool, dude. Could have done without the surprise, asshole. Itward gives Fran a toy cat as a present and explains what happens when she takes ectoplamatin. Apparently, she sees a mixture of all realities. The ultra reality is like an invisible room where all things exist at the same time. Humans perceive their reality by defining it, such as how they understand time by defining past, present, and future. Fran's perception of reality is not linked to definition. Some turbulence interrupts the conversation. Actually, it's Kamala's destroying the automatic driver. Turns out that's what those dark creatures are called. It also turns out they hate water, so Fran attacks it with water and it flies away. Unfortunately, the damage has already been done. The ship goes down and crashes, beginning Chapter 4, Part 2. Fran and Mr. Midnight wake up in the woods. Itward is nowhere to be seen. Fran has finished off all the pills already, but they're so close to home, they don't need any extra help at this point. They walk all the way back to Aunt Grace's house. The house is locked, but Mr. Midnight is able to get in through a window. Just then, Dr. Deern pulls up. He, of course, doesn't believe Fran that Mr. Midnight is inside the house and forces her into the car with him. During the drive, Deern reveals himself to be not such a bad man. He was fired from the asylum for discovering suspicious things and shows Fran that the asylum already proclaimed her death by freezing in the woods. Deern also discovered that Fran's medicine had been switched with a variant of Duotine with a much higher dose of ectoplamatin. So it turns out ectoplamatin was not the drug itself, itself, but a component of the drug. Deeren explains it creates a doorway between the conscious and subconscious. If there's too much, the door opens too wide. So basically it's a psychedelic. The doctor tries to convince Fran that everything she's seen up to this point has only been in her head. She says if it's all in her head, then maybe she can control it. And she sees a vision of sorts of Dr. Deeren speaking of his abusive father. When she asks him about it, she sees that what she heard was true. So it seems that the duotine really has unlocked some sort of ability after all. Fran mentions the twins to the doctor, who says that reminds him of twins that were sewn together by a Dr. Oswald to test the reaction of their DNA. They died a few months later and their bodies thrown into a well, probably the same one we went into. At this point, we discover that although Deeren may be a good man, he's also a highly irresponsible one. He brings Fran to her own parents' graves to dig up their corpses and look for clues. Not only should getting Fran into a safe place have been his first priority, but asking a 10-year-old girl to dig up her own parents' grave is truly a cruel thing to do. After opening the graves and finding absolutely nothing helpful, they walk back to the car. At this point, it feels like things are wrapping up, but nope. The Prince of Darkness himself, Remor, appears to steal the doctor and Fran away. And so begins Chapter 5. Fran wakes up tied to a bed, put there by her Aunt Grace, who as it turns out, kinda sucks. She blames Mr. Midnight for the death of Fran's parents and then creates a creepy rhyme about it. Seriously, listen to this. Little shining Fran, don't you worry about the lies. The seeker of the truth will always die because the evil will never hide. Little shining Fran, go to bed and sleep tight and forget the pain inside your mind. You were selected to suffer, to cry, and hate. This is where the game gets even more trippy than it was before. Through her own willpower, Fran sees a younger version of herself earlier in time, except this Fran from the past knows everything about the creatures they can see already, but she doesn't know Mr. Midnight. It seems like in addition to the alternate realities, there's also alternate timelines that can be contacted, so if one were to travel in the past, they wouldn't just be traveling back in a straight line, they would be intersecting onto another timeline. At least I think that's what's going on. Younger Fran unshackles present Fran and gives her a paper with a riddle on it from Palantris to help her unlock the box she received in Itursta. Inside is a cat-shaped key and instruction to build a Mabuka clock. As a matter of fact, Fran seems to be in another reality right now. The room she's in is connected to other rooms that are part of Mabuka's den. Mabuka being the mother of all darkness, the genuine mother of Remor, and the queen of the fifth reality. The fifth reality seems to be the opposite of the second reality. If the second reality is a place of peace and light, then the fifth reality is a place of chaos and darkness. A place where what makes the residents happy is the opposite of what would make anyone happy in the second or third reality. Which is not to say they are malicious per se. In a sense they are, but basically, if I hadn't already seen the second Hellraiser and you told me the nanobites came from the fifth reality, I would believe that. We find out from a giant eyeball that Mr. Midnight was taken into Mabuka's lair, so we gotta go down there and wake her up. We construct the box and enter into the very room Mabuka slumbers. Fran wakes Mabuka up, who asks her if her son has already entered her head with a red potion or bean. Fran answers she already took a whole bottle of duotine, and Mabuka explains this means that her power has already been unleashed. According to Mabuka, Fran was selected by the 5 realms of essential existence to be the keeper of the key. Okay, they just took that one from Ghostbusters. There was a prophecy long ago of who the keeper of the key would be, the one chased by the Prince of Darkness, Remor. Mabuka opens her heart for us, and that leads us down into a waiting room? We take a number, and does that 3-eyed elephant feel out of place? It just doesn't feel like it belongs in this reality. Or this game at all, really. Feels like it belongs in a Space Quest game or something. Fran makes a deal with the next thing in line that if she can figure out what is wrong with it, it'll exchange its ticket with her. She asks the all-seeing eye what its ailment is, and it turns out that he has a headache from experiencing too little agony. So Fran has to cry tears of genuine sorrow to make him feel better. Once Fran's spot is up, she is faced with Remor. She demands to know why he killed her parents. Remor responds by giving her a vision that she was the one who killed her parents, but she doesn't buy it for a second. She runs into the next room, which has a passed out Dr. Deeren strapped to an electric chair and Mr. Midnight trapped in a cage, unable to communicate with her. This is where everything finally comes to a head. Aunt Grace and the infamous Dr. Oswald himself enter the room. They reveal that Oswald ran experiments on Fran's mother and aunt when they were younger, and Oswald got Remor to force Fran to kill her parents because they were interfering with his work. However, he considers all of this to be in her best interest. Her mother thought that they would want to kill her, but actually they consider her to be quite special and want to use her for something. And then Grace just drops Mr. Midnight off the side of reality. No! So Fran understandably attacks Grace, but Oswald wheels in from behind and Grace calls Fran insane, and Oswald says he'll use her body while it's still warm. My God, man! Deeren walks in offering to help heal her, but Oswald refuses, saying nothing can stop him now. Well, except apparently for freaking Itward, who hops in and force throws every living person in the room but Deeren. You know, you could have done that like 30 seconds ago, buddy, but alright, it's fine, it's okay, it's fine. You could have saved her freaking life, but... And anyway, Palontras pops in with Mr. Midnight. Oh, thank God. My poor aching heart couldn't take much more of this. Fran gets healed, Dr. Deeren is sent home with his memories erased, and with nothing left to turn back to, Fran follows Palontras and Itward on to other adventures where she'll learn more lessons. And that is Fran Bow. If you've seen the video up to this point, I think it's pretty obvious that yes, I would recommend this game. In fact, even if you've watched the video up to this point and haven't played it for yourself, I would still recommend this game. I left out bits of story and chunks of lore so that anybody who enjoys point and click adventures can go back and experience a lot of things new, even if they already know what the story is. That being said, I hope that as many people support kill-minded games as possible because games like this are incredibly rare. This is one of those games that I feel like takes a couple playthroughs to fully appreciate how the story unfolds, and frankly, I just don't think there's enough games like this in the world. Because although the last quarter of the game convinced me that everything we saw happen in the game really did happen in the game, it still does an exceptionally well job at representing trauma in an emotional way. Anybody with severe childhood trauma is going to feel something very familiar here, and anybody who's not familiar with trauma at all will be able to learn something and understand it a little better. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all have a good month of horror.